When the world collapses into chaos and the walking dead shuffle through ruined cities, the idea of living on an aircraft carrier sounds like the ultimate survival fantasy. A gigantic, steel titan drifting across the endless blue, untouchable by land, undead, or politics. It's like owning your own floating kingdom, complete with weapons, water, and Wi-Fi. But the apocalypse has a cruel sense of humor. What looks like paradise on paper can quickly turn into a 100,000-ton trap when reality kicks in. Let's take a brutally honest, slightly sarcastic look at what it would actually mean to survive on one of these metal monsters when the world has gone full Romero. First, the good news. If survival runs on energy, then congratulations. You've basically won the post-apocalyptic lottery. Modern carriers, especially the U.S. Nimitz-class behemoths, are powered by nuclear reactors that can run for decades without a refill. While everyone else is siphoning gas from rusted sedans or fighting over the last working generator, you're sitting on a self-sustaining power grid that hums along quietly, indifferent to scarcity. You could light up the ocean like a city skyline while the rest of the planet flickers by candlelight. Desalination systems mean fresh, clean water as far as the eye can see. Coffee machines, freezers, and air conditioning all stay online, while other survivors are learning the tragic art of bathing with bottled water. Energy independence isn't just luxury, it's psychological armor. When everyone else is desperate, the sound of your humming reactor is the lullaby of civilization. And let's not forget, an aircraft carrier isn't just a ship, it's a city disguised as one. The infrastructure is a masterpiece of self-containment. You've got sleeping quarters, industrial kitchens, gyms, workshops, machine shops, and storage bays the size of warehouses. You could literally stock enough food and tools to make Costco jealous. And if you get creative, those massive hangars that once housed fighter jets can be turned into makeshift greenhouses or vertical farms. Picture rows of tomatoes growing where F-18s used to sit. It's poetic in a weird, end-of-the-world way. In a zombie apocalypse, space is sanity. While land survivors are crammed into bunkers, choking on recycled air and arguing over beans, you're strolling down wide steel corridors, stretching your legs, maybe even enjoying the luxury of privacy. There's room to organize, breathe, and build a community instead of living like rats in a tin can. Of course, the real crown jewel is defense. On land, survivors depend on rifles, shotguns, and hope. You're guarding your floating fortress with machine guns, anti-aircraft batteries, and possibly missile launchers that can erase problems from several miles away. A zombie horde trying to attack an aircraft carrier is basically comedy material. The armor plating that's designed to resist missiles and torpedoes isn't exactly scared of a few dozen decaying hands scratching at the hull. And then there's the psychological factor. Intimidation. Raiders looking for easy prey might think twice before messing with a ship that looks like a dragon made of steel. Why risk storming the apocalypse equivalent of Mordor when you could just raid a grocery store instead? A carrier doesn't just protect you, it advertises your dominance. It's the keep out sign of all keep out signs, floating across the horizon with guns big enough to make an entire pirate crew reconsider life choices. Even better, your moat is the ocean itself. Zombies can't swim. They don't do boats. The undead invasion stops right at the shoreline. While the rest of humanity is busy boarding up windows and setting up tripwires, your biggest security concern is maybe locking a few ladders and making sure nobody invites trouble aboard. Mobility is another god-tier advantage. A fortress that moves is basically cheating the apocalypse. Trouble on the East Coast? Sail west. A storm brewing in the Pacific? Glide south. The ability to lift anchor and relocate means you can chase safety, supplies, or even sunshine whenever you please. No bunker can offer that kind of freedom. And let's not overlook the medical side of things. On land, a small cut could become a death sentence when infection sets in and antibiotics are just a myth. On a carrier, you've got a literal floating hospital, surgical bays, trauma centers, sterilization gear, and even quarantine rooms. Firefighting systems, hazmat suits, NBC, nuclear, biological, chemical protection. It's like living in the most overprepared emergency ward on Earth. When everyone else is playing amateur doctor with duct tape and whiskey, you're performing surgeries with professional equipment under sterile lights. In an apocalypse where infection spreads faster than gossip, that's a priceless edge. And because this is still a warship, let's talk logistics and scouting. Carriers come with helicopters, small boats, and sometimes planes that can launch reconnaissance runs or supply missions. Want to check if that coastal city still has survivors or maybe a Costco full of snacks? Send a chopper. Need to fetch supplies without risking the mothership? Deploy a dinghy. You're not confined. You're exploring, commanding the seas while others are stuck behind barricades. Add to that the advanced tech. Radar systems, satellite comms, long-range radios. The carrier turns the ocean into a massive early warning system. You'll know about a storm, pirate ship, or zombie-infested flotilla long before it's even visible. Knowledge becomes a weapon, and in the apocalypse, that's often deadlier than any gun. Communication is gold. While others are yelling into broken walkie-talkies, you've got global reach. You can locate allies, warn others, or maybe even rebuild a network of civilization. At this point, you might be thinking, that's it, I'm finding a carrier. Hold that thought, because the moment you stop daydreaming and start doing math, things get dark fast. For all its power, an aircraft carrier has one fatal weakness: food. Sure, you can store a mountain of rations, but eventually, every can of beans and bag of rice runs out. And unless you figure out how to grow corn in a jet engine, you're not feeding hundreds of people indefinitely. You're sitting on the world's most advanced metal island with zero farmland. Hydroponics can delay the inevitable, but it's not enough to replace acres of soil. The ocean is vast, but unless you plan on turning into a full-time fisherman, it won't feed a city-sized crew. When hunger sets in, you'll have no choice but to dock. And that's where things get spicy. Ports are chaos magnets, packed with desperate survivors, raiders, and probably an impressive number of zombies taking their eternal beach vacation. Once you bring that floating fortress into a harbor, you're trapped. Narrow channels, limited escape routes, and plenty of hiding spots for ambushes. It's like trying to park a skyscraper in an alley during a riot. Good luck. And even before you reach shore, there's the maintenance nightmare. A carrier isn't a yacht. It's a labyrinth of systems: nuclear reactors, engines, desalination plants, radar, flight decks, weapons, all demanding constant attention from highly trained specialists. Without nuclear engineers, electricians, and mechanics, it doesn't matter how much firepower you have. Eventually, things will break. One failed reactor cooling system, one missing technician, and suddenly your unsinkable fortress becomes a 100,000-ton floating tomb. That's assuming you even had those experts to begin with. Unless your survivor group include a nuclear physicist, a pilot, a doctor, and a full maintenance crew, your odds of keeping the ship alive long-term are slim. Lose one key person, and the dominoes fall fast. And sure, your main engines might run forever, but your aircraft, helicopters, and boats? They're thirsty. They guzzle fuel like frat boys at a keg party. Once the aviation fuel runs out, your mobility shrinks dramatically. No more scouting runs, no quick supply missions, no flexible response. You're blind, deaf, and stranded. The apocalypse laughs, and your floating utopia starts feeling like an oversized prison cell. Even worse, being huge isn't always a good thing. A carrier is impossible to hide. It's the loudest, brightest, most obvious thing on the water. You might as well hang a neon sign that says, "Treasure chest full of supplies." The sound of generators, the glow of lights, the silhouette on the horizon. It's all visible for miles. Zombies might not notice, but people will. And people are almost always the bigger problem. Pirates, warlords, or organized survivor factions would love to take that ship from you. And if they have enough numbers or enough brains, they just might. Then there's the psychological part no one talks about. Life at sea sounds peaceful for about a month. Then the monotony sets in. No forests, no birds, no news sites. Just the same gray steel decks and the endless blue horizon. The hum of machines replaces the sound of wind in the trees. The walls start to feel closer. Cabin fever grows. Morale dips. A few arguments spark. Eventually, someone snaps. Isolation is a silent predator. It eats through the mind faster than hunger. Even with the best defenses and supplies, the human spirit needs something more than safety. It needs purpose, variation, and contact. Without them, paranoia creeps in. Maybe a crewmate hides food. Maybe a rumor spreads about infection. Suddenly, your floating paradise becomes a powder keg of distrust and despair. And if an actual emergency hits, say, a fire or a small outbreak, the ship's size turns against you. You can't just run into the woods or hide in a barn. You're surrounded by steel and ocean. If containment fails, there's nowhere to go but the water. The same fortress that protected you now becomes a trap. So, are aircraft carriers good in a zombie apocalypse? The answer depends on who you are. If you're part of the elite few who could actually make it aboard, trained crew, skilled engineers, government officials, then yes, it's paradise compared to the chaos on land. You'd have power, security, communication, and time to think about rebuilding civilization. But for the rest of us, the dream dies the moment reality steps in. You can't just walk up to a nuclear-powered supercarrier and ask for a room. These ships aren't Airbnb for survivors. They're floating fortresses designed for trained militaries, not ragtag apocalypse wanderers. It's a seductive fantasy, though, sailing across a silent ocean, safe above the chaos, with the undead world far behind you. Yet every fortress has its flaws, and every paradise has its price. The carrier might protect you from zombies, but not from hunger, madness, or the inevitable decay of human systems. In the end, the aircraft carrier stands as the perfect metaphor for survival itself. Powerful, imposing, but fragile once the balance breaks. It's a throne built on the ocean, and a reminder that in the apocalypse, even the strongest steel can rust.